this is the walkthrough for chapters 13 and 14 of Boy in the Striped Pajamas. Like every other PowerPoint, you will use the first few slides to create sentences. It says, referring to the events in the section. Typically how this would have worked, guys, this is the exact study guide that we would have had in class with me right in front of you, and we would have read the section and then gone back over it and been able to discuss specifically where these words were used. But since we can't do that, just write a sentence using the words correctly. You have the definitions, you can use Google, just click and type. I hope this e-learning adventure isn't a catastrophe. It has nothing to do with Boy in the Striped Pajamas. I'm just making up sentences at this point. Alright, before Maria told Bruno why Pavel was no longer a doctor, she said, "You mustn't tell anyone, do you understand? We will all get into terrible trouble." Why might this get Pavel into terrible trouble? Alright, in order for Maria to understand why Pavel wasn't a doctor anymore, Pavel would have had to tell her. Is Pavel allowed to tell Maria anything? Is he allowed to talk to Maria? Think about that. In your opinion, what was significant about Bruno noticing changes in Pavel? All right. He has been living there for quite some time, and day after day he sees this man, and slowly he starts to notice these subtle changes, and yet he is not able to do the same for his friend Shmuel. What do you think maybe Bruno might be starting to realize, though, in seeing that Pavel is slowly getting more and more unhealthy? He even says this can't be such a nice place. Alright. How did Bruno react when he didn't understand or like Shmuel's comments? Why do you suppose he reacted that way? Cite your examples from the text. So whenever Shmuel says something that Bruno doesn't like, Bruno pretends that he doesn't say it at all, and he just moves on. Why do you think he does that? And maybe pull some examples. Again, this is from chapters 13 and 14, so you could just skim the pages and find some examples. All right, what did Father mean when he said, "It's history that got us here today. We are correcting history here"? Think back to that lesson that I did at the beginning of our Holocaust unit, when I told you about, very briefly, about how we got to this point. World War I, Germany takes a hit at the end, and they have to take full responsibility for the war. Even though it's not really all their fault, they have to take the responsibility. And in doing so, they have to pay lots of reparations, which hurts the economy significantly. People are upset. And more importantly, people are upset because the people in power sort of surrendered. They could have kept fighting. It wouldn't have mattered, but they could have. And so the German people feel like they have been wronged. And so Father is saying, we're correcting that. He's saying that we are punishing the people that should have been punished because it was their fault that we gave up in the first place. He's talking about the Jews. And we are fixing the wrongs that were done to us. And then how would you have responded to Father if you could have responded in any way you like? This is totally your opinion response. For slide 9, explain why Father questioned Lieutenant Kotler about his father, the professor. All right, so Lieutenant Kotler mentions that his dad left Germany right at the beginning of the war, and that implies that he left because he didn't agree with Germany taking over and doing what they've done. And so, as a Nazi lieutenant, it's odd that you have a father, someone who should influence you greatly, who opposes the government. And so it's against the law to oppose the government. So thinking about all those things, answer that question. What was significant about Lieutenant Kotler's father leaving Germany in 1938? Okay, well, think about when Hitler rises to power. All right, describe how Kotler's treatment of Pavel affected Bruno. All right, he says that he cried a lot. So go back to that chapter and reread it and think about and find the evidence that says this is how he reacted. And what was significant about Bruno's reaction? Think about why people cry. People cry because they're sad. People cry because they're upset by things, and you don't get upset over things that you don't care about. So the fact that Bruno was upset about Pavel being hurt must mean that Bruno feels what type of way about Pavel? Why did Bruno want Shmuel to crawl under the fence? What did Bruno realize when he told Gretel about his imaginary friend? All right. Again, these are easily answered in the chapter. Just give me your best shot at them. Shmuel said the world on his side of the fence wasn't that great, and Bruno said his life wasn't great as well. How do you suppose Bruno's response made Shmuel feel, and why? Okay, use your common sense. Shmuel is in a prison being starved and beaten and systematically killed off. And Bruno is living the high life, eating chocolate and getting to do whatever he wants. And he doesn't get, he definitely is not living a terrible life. So how do you think that made Shmuel feel? And then describe the 4 key points the author was trying to make in this section, then write an impact that might have on this entire story. All right, so think about the points that could be made with Lieutenant Kotler and his father. Think of the point of where Bruno lied to his sister. Think of how Bruno reacted to Pavel. Just any points that you can figure out or think of, write them on the key points, and then how could this key point have impact on the entire story? Okay. Just do your best with that slide, guys. Advice columns were popular during the 1930s. Pretend you're Bruno and decide to write a letter to the help section of a magazine called Dear Dr. Help. He wants advice on everything he's dealing with in these chapters. Write the letter from Bruno below. Then write the return letter from Dr. Help. So this is Bruno's section. Dear Dr. Help. My name. And then you could tell him about his sister, having to lie to his sister, about seeing Pavel beaten, about hearing Father and Lieutenant Kotler argue, about being uncomfortable with all the things Shmuel says. Anything you want to talk about, that's where you would, and then you have to respond. Dear Bruno. And this is where Dr. Help would give advice. And it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be significant. Just do your best. And slide 16, list and brainstorm internal character traits that Bruno and Shmuel share, and then brainstorm internal character traits that only one of the 2 characters has. All right, internal character traits are compassionate, organized, thoughtful, kind, caring, evil, happy, naive. So these are things that this box here is what is shared. And then pick one character, just Bruno or Shmuel, and tell me about the ones that only they have. So I think curiosity is one that only Bruno has. I don't think Shmuel is curious at all. I think he has lost that curiosity that children typically have because of his environment. He is not curious. He does not want to explore. So I think Bruno would definitely be more curious. I think Bruno is definitely naive, and Shmuel, he understands. He doesn't argue back with Bruno on things that Bruno says because he knows in his heart that arguing doesn't get you anywhere, and that in the end Bruno's a German, and the Germans he's had experience with don't take well to arguing. So things like that. Just a simple answer. I don't want long, drawn-out answers. Just do your best. If you complete this to the best of your ability, you're going to do fine.